The impact was less a sudden jolt and more a prolonged, agonizing symphony of tearing metal and screaming alarms. Kale's pod, a relic from a time before humanity truly understood interstellar travel, bucked and spun like a dying animal. He'd known this was a long shot, a desperate last-ditch effort to escape the pursuing Xylosian patrol, but he hadn't anticipated such a spectacular failure. The atmosphere of Xylos Prime, a world known for its vicious, unpredictable weather patterns, had torn his craft to pieces. He woke to the pungent smell of ozone and damp earth, a metallic tang of blood in his mouth. Every inch of his body screamed in protest, but the survival instincts honed over years of living on the fringe took over. First, assess the damage. The pod was a twisted wreck, half buried in a crater of shattered foliage. He was miraculously alive, though his left arm throbbed with a dull ache. He forced himself to move, crawling out of the mangled cockpit, his boots sinking into the spongy alien soil. The world outside was a kaleidoscope of bioluminescent flora and towering, crystalline rock formations that seemed to pierce the perpetually twilight sky. Strange guttural calls echoed from the dense, overgrown jungle, a constant reminder of his precarious position. He was alone, marooned on a planet notorious for its lethal fauna and flora, with no working comms and dwindling supplies. Panic, a cold tendril, tried to coil around his heart, but Kale had learned to master it. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. He spent the next few hours foraging, salvaging what he could from the wreckage: a battered medkit, a hydration pack, a few nutrient bars, and his trusty, if somewhat antiquated, energy rifle. The air was thick with humidity, and the strange, multi-limbed insects buzzed around him, occasionally darting in for an experimental bite. He ignored them, his focus unwavering. He needed shelter, and he needed it, before whatever creatures made those unsettling calls decided to investigate the source of the crash. As the twin moons of Xylos Prime began their slow ascent, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape, Kale found a promising cave, a dark maw in the side of a crystalline cliff. It wasn't ideal, but it offered protection from the elements and, hopefully, from anything with more teeth than he possessed. He lit a small, carefully contained fire using salvaged ignition modules and dry alien wood, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. He was tending to his injured arm, meticulously cleaning a deep gash with antiseptic wipes when the growl came. It wasn't a distant echo. It was a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the very ground beneath him, emanating from the mouth of the cave. Kyle froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. The firelight flickered, illuminating a pair of glowing crimson eyes in the darkness. Then a massive, hulking form stepped into the periphery of the firelight. It was huge, easily twice Kale's height and 4 times his width, a creature of nightmare. Its skin was a mosaic of obsidian scales and sharp, bony plates, a ridge of jagged spikes running down its spine. Its head was a terrifying blend of reptilian and feline, with a powerful jaw lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. This was a ravager. He'd seen hollows of them, heard the chilling tales. Apex predators, known for their cunning, their ferocity, and their insatiable hunger. The ravager let out another low growl, a sound that promised pain and oblivion. Kale's heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, overwhelming silence. Every fiber of his being screamed to raise his rifle, to fire, to run. But something in the ravager's eyes, a flicker of something he couldn't quite identify, made him pause. It wasn't just hunger. It was a primal, almost desperate intensity. Against all instinct, against every rule of survival he'd ever learned, Kale lowered his rifle. He looked at the creature, really looked at it, past the teeth and the claws and the terrifying reputation. He saw the gauntness around its powerful shoulders, the way its stomach seemed to be pulled taut against its frame. He saw the desperation in those crimson eyes, a mirror of his own, in a strange, twisted way. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. The words that came out were not a threat, not a plea, but a simple, almost absurd question, delivered in a voice that was remarkably steady, despite the terror thrumming through his veins. "Hey there," he said, holding up an empty hand in a gesture of peace. You eaten today?" The ravager blinked, its massive head tilting slightly to the side. The growl died in its throat, replaced by a low rumble that was less threatening and more curious. Kyle held his breath, expecting to be torn limb from limb at any second. This was insane. He was insane. No sane person talked to a ravager, let alone asked if it had eaten. But the creature didn't move to attack. It remained at the mouth of the cave, its glowing eyes fixed on Kyle, a silent interrogation in its gaze. Kale cautiously lowered his hand, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't want to spook it, or provoke it. Both outcomes would be equally fatal. "Look," Kyle said, his voice soft, almost conversational. "I don't have much, but I've got a few nutrient bars. They're not great, but they're better than nothing, right?" He reached into his pack, pulling out a foil-wrapped bar. It felt ridiculously small and insignificant in his hand, a meager offering to such a formidable beast. The ravager's nose twitched, and a low, rumbling sound emanated from its chest. It took a hesitant step forward, then another, its heavy paws thudding softly on the cave floor. Kale's heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel the heat radiating from the creature, a primal warmth that was both terrifying and, strangely, compelling. He unwrapped the nutrient bar, the crinkling sound echoing in the silent cave. He broke off a piece, extending it towards the ravager with an open palm. "Here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Just a small piece. It's protein-rich. Good for you." The ravager sniffed at the offering, its glowing eyes never leaving Kale's face. Its massive head lowered, its snout nudging Kale's palm. Kale flinched, but held steady. He could feel the soft, leathery texture of its skin, the faint warmth of its breath. Then, with a surprisingly delicate movement, the creature took the piece of nutrient bar from his hand. It chewed slowly, thoughtfully, its powerful jaws making barely a sound. Kale watched, mesmerized, as the ravager swallowed, a soft rumble reverberating from its chest. For a moment it simply stood there, its gaze unwavering. Then it nudged Kyle's hand again, a soft whine escaping its throat. Kyle understood. It wanted more. He broke off another piece, and another, until the entire bar was gone. The ravager consumed each piece with the same deliberate care, its initial aggressive posture slowly softening, replaced by something akin to hunger, yes, but also a growing curiosity. As Kale offered the last piece, the ravager leaned its head closer, its large, rough tongue lapping at his hand, a strange, raspy sensation. It wasn't a malicious gesture. It was almost affectionate. Kyle, against all logic, felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He was sharing food with a creature that could rip him to shreds, and it wasn't trying to rip him to shreds. He remembered something his grandmother used to say. The quickest way to a heart, even a wild one, is through the stomach. He'd always dismissed it as folksy wisdom, but here, on a hostile alien world, facing down a legendary predator, it felt profoundly true. The ravager, its hunger momentarily sated, settled down near the mouth of the cave, its crimson eyes still on Kale. But now with a different kind of intensity. It wasn't the predatory glare from before. It was more like watchful observation. Kale, still reeling from the surreal interaction, decided to push his luck. "So," he said, speaking to the massive beast as if it were an old friend, "you got a name, big guy? Or do you just answer to hungry growly thing?" The ravager let out a low chuffing sound, almost like a chuckle. Kale blinked. Had it understood him, or was he simply projecting? Either way, the immediate threat seemed to have receded. For tonight at least he had an unexpected, terrifying, and utterly baffling companion. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had made a very unlikely friend. Perhaps he had made a very unlikely friend. Days bled into nights on Xylo's prime, and Kale's improbable companionship with the ravager, whom he had tentatively dubbed Rage, a name the creature seemed to accept with a low rumble, deepened into a strange, silent understanding. Rage, it turned out, was not merely a terrifying eating machine. It was intelligent, observant, and possessed of a surprising capacity for communication beyond growls and snarls. Their interactions were often wordless. Kale would gesture, point, or use simple repetitive sounds, and Rage would respond with head tilts, body language, or a variety of chuffs and clicks that Kale slowly learned to interpret. When Rage nudged Kale towards a specific patch of glowing fungi, Kale learned it meant the fungi were edible, or perhaps even had medicinal properties. When Rage bristled, its hackles rising, Kale knew danger was near and would instinctively seek cover. One evening, as Kale was attempting to repair a critical component of his energy rifle, a small multi-legged creature, similar to a venomous scorpion, scuttled out from beneath a rock, its stinger arcing menacingly. Before Cale could react, Rage moved with astonishing speed, a blur of scales and muscle. One massive paw crushed the creature, its bioluminescent fluid splattering harmlessly against the cave floor. Rage then looked at Kyle, a possessive growl rumbling in its chest, as if to say, "Mine. You are under my protection." Cale, for his part, continued to share his meager rations. He even managed to find a source of naturally occurring, protein-rich grubs that Rage seemed to particularly enjoy, a discovery that earned him a rumbling purr that vibrated through the very ground. He learned that Rage preferred to hunt at night, its glowing eyes and silent movements making it a truly formidable predator. Sometimes Cale would watch it from the safety of their cave, a shadow amongst shadows, until it returned. Often with a fresh kill it would meticulously consume, sometimes even bringing a smaller, less appealing to Cale portion to the cave mouth for Cale to consider. The galaxy's perception of Ravagers was simple, mindless killing machines driven solely by instinct. But Cale was seeing something far more complex. He saw a creature capable of empathy, of loyalty, and even a strange form of affection. He saw a creature that, like him, was simply trying to survive in a harsh, unforgiving world. The Xylosians, who revered these creatures from a distance as symbols of untamed nature, would be aghast. The interstellar community, who actively avoided worlds where Ravagers were known to thrive, would call him mad. His human perspective, so often deemed simplistic or primitive by advanced alien races, was proving to be his greatest asset. He didn't see a monster. He saw another living being. He didn't see an enemy. He saw a potential ally. And that fundamental difference in perspective was slowly bridging a gap that entire civilizations deemed impassable. One morning, Cale awoke to the sound of soft nudging. Rage was pushing a large flat leaf towards him, covered in an array of unfamiliar berries. Cale sniffed them cautiously, then looked at Rage, who let out a low chuff, nudging the leaf again. Cale, trusting the creature, ate one. It was sweet, with a tangy aftertaste, and surprisingly delicious. Rage had found him breakfast. This simple act, a silent offering of food, solidified Cale's conviction. Rage wasn't just tolerating him, it was caring for him. In a world designed to kill, in the face of a creature designed to kill, Kyle had found a protector, an unlikely friend, and a testament to the enduring, adaptable nature of human kindness. He still didn't know how he would get off this planet, or what the Xylosians would do if they found him. But with Rage by his side, the prospect of survival seemed a little less daunting, and a lot more interesting. The days on Xylos Prime continued to pass, marked by Cale's persistent efforts to repair his ship's long-range communicator and Rage's unwavering companionship. Cale had managed to salvage enough components to create a makeshift workshop in their cave, the air often filled with the faint smell of solder and ozone. Rage would often watch him, its head tilted, a low rumble of curiosity emanating from its chest as Cale meticulously pieced together circuits and rerouted power conduits. One particularly frustrating afternoon, a surge of energy fried a delicate wiring harness, sending sparks showering across Kyle's workbench. With a frustrated sigh, he slammed his fist on the rock surface, the accumulated stress of his isolation and the seemingly insurmountable task finally boiling over. Rage, observing his distress, let out a soft whine and nudged his hand with its massive snout, a gesture of comfort. Cale, despite his frustration, felt a surge of warmth. Even in this desolate place, he wasn't truly alone. His breakthrough came on the 27th cycle since the crash. After weeks of painstaking work, cross-referencing schematics from his datapad with the damaged components, Cale finally managed to jury-rig a low-power short-burst comms array. It wouldn't be able to send a full message, but it might be enough to transmit a distress beacon, a simple ping that, if lucky, would catch the attention of a passing freighter or, more likely, a search and rescue team. He powered it up, the salvaged console flickering to life with a hopeful hum. He set the frequency to a known emergency channel, one used by independent traders and smaller exploratory vessels. He knew the Xylosians wouldn't be listening on this frequency. They preferred their highly encrypted military channels. This was his only shot at being found by someone who wouldn't immediately clap him in binders. With a deep breath, Cale initiated the distress sequence. The console emitted a series of rapid beeps, and a small green light blinked erratically. It was transmitting. He didn't know how far the signal would reach, or if it would even be received, but it was a start. Rage, sensing the shift in Kale's demeanor, let out a low, questioning rumble, its glowing eyes fixed on the blinking light. "It's a call for help." "Big guy," Kale explained, running a hand through Rage's rough scales. "If someone's out there, they'll know we're here." Hours passed, then an entire cycle. The green light continued to blink, a silent testament to Kale's desperate hope. He was beginning to lose faith, the crushing weight of their isolation pressing down on him. When the console emitted a faint, almost imperceptible ping, Kyle practically leaped to the console, his heart leaping into his throat. He tried to amplify the signal, his fingers flying across the makeshift controls. Another ping, clearer this time. Then a series of rapid-fire data bursts, too garbled to decode, but undeniably a response. Someone had heard them. Rage, sensing Kale's excitement, let out a deep purr, its powerful tail thumping softly on the cave floor. Kale's mind raced. Who was it? A friendly vessel? Another Xylosian patrol? The odds were stacked against him, but for the first time in weeks, a tangible glimmer of hope had pierced the oppressive darkness of Xylos Prime. He couldn't risk transmitting a full message. The Xylosians were too good at triangulation, but the very fact that someone had responded, even with a garbled signal, was enough. It meant they weren't completely off the galactic grid. It meant he had to be ready for rescue or ready for another fight. With Rage by his side, Kale felt a renewed sense of purpose. The waiting game had begun. The whisper of rescue had turned into a faint but undeniable shout. 2 cycles after Kale's distress beacon received its faint reply, a ship entered Xylos Prime's orbit. It wasn't a sleek Xylosian patrol vessel, nor was it a heavily armed cruiser. It was a utilitarian scout ship, its hull scarred from countless atmospheric re-entries, painted in the dull gray of independent asteroid miners and long-haul freighters. Its name, emblazoned crudely on its side, was the Stardust Drifter. Kale watched its approach through a salvaged scope, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and trepidation. Relief that someone had actually come, trepidation about who those someones might be. Rage sat silently beside him, its glowing eyes also fixed on the distant speck of light descending through the atmosphere. The creature seemed to sense the significance of the moment. A low, watchful rumble emanating from its chest. The drifter landed a few kilometers from their cave, kicking up a cloud of alien dust and foliage. Kyle, leaving Rage hidden in the deepest part of the cave, cautiously made his way towards the landing zone, his energy rifle held ready. He had no idea what to expect. He found 3 figures emerging from the ship's ramp, silhouetted against the setting sun. They were a motley crew, clearly not military. The first was a stocky 4-armed Cathar, its leathery skin the color of deep violet. The second was a spindly insectoid Zillion, its compound eyes nervously darting around the hostile environment. The third was a bulky, heavily armored Vaxler, its triple-jointed legs making it look like a walking tank. Not a single human amongst them. As Kale stepped into view, they collectively froze, their weapons snapping up. The Cathar, clearly the leader, spoke first, its voice a gravelly rumble. "Identify yourself! You're on Xylosian territory." Kyle, raising his hands in a gesture of peace, replied in fluent Gal Standard. "I'm Kale, a human freighter pilot. My ship went down. I sent the distress signal." The Zillion chirped nervously, its antennae twitching. "A human on Xylos Prime? That's impossible. Humans are not permitted in this sector." "Well, clearly I am," Kyle retorted, trying to keep his tone light. "And I assure you it wasn't by choice. Can you help me get off this rock?" The Vaxlor, its deep voice surprisingly calm, lowered its weapon slightly. "We detected anomalous energy readings from your crash site. Consistent with a human vessel, yes, but also something else. A large non-technological signature." Its multiple eyes narrowed. "What kind of company have you been keeping, human?" Before Kale could answer, a deep, resonant growl echoed from the jungle behind him. The scout crew immediately stiffened, their weapons once again raised, aimed directly at Kale. The Cathar's violet skin seemed to pale. That's a Ravager?" it stammered, its 4 hands trembling. Kale sighed. This was going to be difficult. "Relax," he said, trying to project calm. "He's with me." The Zillion let out a high-pitched squeak of disbelief. "With you? Humans are even crazier than the legends say. No one befriends a Ravager. They are mindless killing machines. Just then, Rage emerged from the tree line, stepping into the open. Its glowing crimson eyes swept over the alien crew, its powerful form radiating an undeniable aura of predatory power. The crew of the Stardust Drifter gasped, taking a collective step back. The Vaxlor, despite its bulk, looked genuinely terrified. Rage stopped beside Kale, nudging him gently with its snout, a low, questioning rumble in its chest. It looked at the armed aliens, then back at Kale as if asking, "Are these friends or food?" Kale placed a reassuring hand on Rage's head, addressing the terrified crew. "See, he's quite friendly." Most of the time, he offered them a small, hopeful smile. "So about that ride." The Cathar exchanged nervous glances with its crewmates. The Zillion was practically vibrating with fear. The Vaxlor, however, still seemed to be processing what it was witnessing. A human calmly petting a Ravager as if it were a pet. The galaxy's understanding of humanity and of Xylos Prime's apex predators was about to be severely challenged. The skittish crew of the Stardust Drifter now faced a choice: risk the legendary human madness, or leave a survivor and his terrifying companion to their fate. The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut with a vibroblade. The scout crew, still shaking from the sight of Rage, exchanged worried glances. The Cathar finally cleared its throat, its voice still a little shaky. "Look, human," it began, "we appreciate the distress signal, and we don't like leaving sentient beings stranded, but a Ravager, that's a different matter entirely. We can't bring that thing onto our ship." Kale looked from the terrified aliens to Rage, who seemed to understand the gist of the conversation, a low growl rumbling in its chest. "He's not a thing," Kale corrected, his voice firm. "He's Rage, and he's the reason I'm still alive. He's not coming on your ship unarmed any more than I am." He then pointed to his dilapidated crash site. "And if you want to salvage anything from my vessel, you'll need his help. He knows this territory better than any scanner." The Vaxlor, who had been quietly observing the interaction, finally spoke. "He speaks truthfully, Cathar. Those anomalous energy signatures we detected, they seem to emanate directly from the immediate vicinity of this Rage creature. It seems to have a natural affinity for avoiding Xylosian patrols. It may be an asset, not a liability, for our egress." The Vaxlor's logical assessment, devoid of the Cathar's fear or the Zillion's panic, seemed to cut through the emotional tension. The Cathar considered this, its multiple eyes narrowing. The lure of salvage, especially from a human ship, was a powerful motivator for an independent freighter crew. "All right," it conceded, though clearly still hesitant. "He stays on the landing ramp contained until we assess the situation. No aggressive moves. If he so much as growls at one of my crew, he's getting a stun blast." Kale nodded, understanding the compromise. He turned to Rage, placing a hand on its massive head. "Rage," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. "These are temporary allies. They will help us. You need to be calm. No growls, no showing teeth. Understand?" Rage chuffed, a surprisingly soft sound, and nudged Kale's hand again. Its glowing eyes, however, never left the scout crew, a silent warning in their depths. The Cathar gulped, clearly not entirely convinced, but motioned for its crew to proceed. Over the next few hours, under the watchful, nervous eyes of the Stardust Drifter's crew, Kale and Rage worked together. Kale directed the salvage operation, pointing out crucial components from his wrecked pod. Rage, with its immense strength and surprisingly delicate manipulation of its claws, helped move heavy debris, clearing paths and retrieving parts that would have been impossible for the alien crew to reach. The Zillion, initially terrified, slowly grew less skittish as it observed Rage's disciplined behavior. The Vaxlor, ever the pragmatic one, even risked approaching Rage to examine its unique epidermal scales, though it kept a respectful distance. The Cathar, however, remained wary, constantly checking its stun blaster. As the last salvaged crate was loaded onto the Stardust Drifter, the Cathar finally looked at Kale, a grudging respect in its multifaceted eyes. "You're either the luckiest fool in the galaxy, human, or you truly understand these creatures in a way no one else does." "Just trying to survive," Kale replied, shrugging. "And a little empathy goes a long way, even with a Ravager." With the salvage secured, it was time to leave. Kale carefully led Rudge onto the landing ramp, the creature moving with a surprising grace for its size. The Cathar had positioned a makeshift barrier to keep Rage separated from the crew, though Kale suspected it was more for the crew's peace of mind than Rage's actual threat level. as the ship's engines whined to life, and the Stardust Drifter began its ascent. Kyle stood beside Rage on the ramp, looking back at the hostile, beautiful world of Xylos Prime. He had arrived alone and broken, and he was leaving with a damaged ship's worth of salvage, a terrified alien crew, and a loyal, terrifying companion. His journey was far from over, but he had found an unexpected alliance, a testament to humanity's unique ability to forge connections in the most improbable of circumstances. The galaxy, it seemed, was still full of surprises, and humanity was still full of resilience. The journey on the Stardust Drifter was fraught with a different kind of tension than the one Kale had experienced on Xylos Prime. While Rage remained calm and contained within the designated cargo bay, its mere presence aboard the small scout ship was a constant source of anxiety for the Cathar, Zillion, and even the usually stoic Vaxlor. Kale spent much of his time with Rage, feeding it nutrient paste he'd synthesized from scavenged supplies and even attempting to teach it rudimentary gestures. He knew that the crew's apprehension wasn't entirely unwarranted. Rage was still a powerful, unpredictable force. But he also knew Rage's true nature, a complex blend of predator and protector. Their first stop was a neutral space station, a bustling hub for independent traders and smugglers, far from Xylosian patrols. As soon as the Stardust Drifter docked, word of Kale and his pet Ravager spread like wildfire through the station. Whispers followed Kyle everywhere he went, alien eyes wide with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and morbid curiosity. Humans were already considered an enigma in the galaxy, adaptable, resilient, and prone to bizarre behaviors. But befriending a Ravager pushed them into an entirely new category of eccentricity. The Cathar, who had initially agreed to transport Kale and Rage only under duress and the promise of lucrative salvage, found itself unexpectedly famous. Its comms unit was bombarded with requests for interviews, offers from xenobiologists, and even a few panicked warnings from security forces. The station's administrator, a portly Gribble, personally summoned Kale to an audience. "Human Kale," the Gribble began, its multiple eyes blinking rapidly. "This situation is unprecedented. A living Ravager, off-world, under human control. This could cause a panic. We have Xylosian envoys on this station. They view these creatures as sacred, if dangerous symbols. Your pet is a walking diplomatic incident." Kyle, standing calmly before the agitated Gribble, shrugged. "He's not under my control, Administrator. He's my companion. And he's not doing any harm. He's just existing very loudly, according to some," the Gribble grumbled. "And the Xylosians have already lodged a formal complaint. They believe you've somehow desecrated their sacred beast." Just then, a team of armed Xylosian security personnel, their sleek, dark armor glinting under the station's fluorescent lights, burst into the office. Their leader, a tall, imposing Xylosian with a particularly aggressive set of mandibles, pointed a stun rifle at Kale. "Human, you are in violation of multiple galactic statutes. Surrender the Ravager! It belongs to Xylos Prime." Kale didn't flinch. "He belongs to himself, just like any other sentient being. He chose to come with me." Before the Xylosian could respond, a low guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the very foundations of the Gribble's office. Rage, having sensed Kale's distress, had somehow made its way from the cargo bay and was now standing in the doorway, its massive form filling the entrance, its crimson eyes glowing ominously. The Xylosian security team, despite their heavy armor and advanced weaponry, visibly recoiled, their stun rifles wavering. The leader, however, held his ground, though a nervous twitch in his mandibles betrayed his fear. "You are protecting a wild beast, human! You defy galactic law!" Kale stepped forward, placing a hand on Rage's massive leg. "He's not a beast. He's a loyal friend. And if you want to take him, you'll have to go through me." His eyes, though human, held a surprising ferocity, a quiet determination that unnerved the Xylosians more than Rage's obvious power. The standoff hung in the air, thick with unspoken threats. The Gribble wrung its multiple hands, muttering about diplomatic crises. The Xylosians, caught between their orders and the terrifying reality of a human-allied Ravager, hesitated. Kyle, meanwhile, stood firm, a living testament to humanity's baffling blend of empathy and stubbornness, ready to protect his unlikely companion, even if it meant defying an entire galaxy. The scrutiny of the galactic community had begun, and Kale and Rage were at its very epicenter. The standoff in the Gribble's office ended not with violence, but with a tense, uneasy truce. The Xylosians, wary of provoking the Ravager and the seemingly fearless human, retreated, promising further diplomatic action. Kale, however, knew that their retreat was only temporary. He and Rage were now a galactic anomaly, a topic of intense debate, and a symbol of humanity's strange, unpredictable power. Word of the incident spread rapidly across the space lanes. HoloNets buzzed with images of Kale, the human, standing shoulder to shoulder with a creature considered a mythic terror. Xenobiologists clamored for access. Military strategists pondered the implications of a species capable of such unprecedented interspecies bonding. The Xylosians, embarrassed by the public display, doubled down on their claims, portraying Kale as a rogue, a poacher who had somehow corrupted their sacred predator. But amidst the fear and confusion, a new narrative began to emerge, whispered among the independent traders and less rigid alien cultures. They saw Kale not as a madman, but as someone who had transcended traditional boundaries, someone who had looked beyond fear and found connection. They saw in Rage's loyalty not a perversion, but a testament to a different kind of strength, a strength rooted in understanding and compassion. Kyle and Rage continued their journey, picking up odd jobs to earn passage on various freighters, their reputation preceding them everywhere they went. They visited bustling market stations, quiet research outposts, and even dangerous asteroid mining colonies. At each stop, their presence sparked a mixture of awe, terror, and profound curiosity. Humans, once dismissed as a minor, if somewhat annoying, species, were now being reevaluated. The human factor, as it became known, was the unpredictable element that humanity brought to the galactic stage. It wasn't their technology, which was often rudimentary compared to others. It wasn't their brute strength, though they were surprisingly resilient. It was their innate capacity for empathy, their stubborn refusal to conform to established norms, and their baffling ability to connect with even the most fearsome of creatures. One day, on a remote agricultural world, Kale found himself approached by a delegation of scholars from the highly advanced Viridian Collective, a species known for its profound wisdom and detached observation of other cultures. Their leader, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering construct, addressed Kyle with a voice that resonated with ancient wisdom. "Human Kyle," it began, its voice a melodic hum. "Your interaction with the Ravager Rage has caused much contemplation within our collective. We have observed countless species across the galaxy, and we have never witnessed such a profound bond with a creature of such primal ferocity. What is it, human, that allows you to see beyond the predator?" Kale looked at Rage, who was calmly resting beside him, its crimson eyes softly glowing. He smiled. "It's simple, really. I just asked if he was hungry, and then I kept asking, in different ways. Sometimes the most dangerous things just need a little kindness. And everyone, even a Ravager, needs to feel seen." The Viridian leader hummed thoughtfully, its construct shimmering brighter. "A profound insight, human. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated the true nature of your species. Your human factor is not a flaw. It is a force." As Kale and Rage continued their travels, they became more than just a human and a Ravager. They became a living legend, a walking testament to the power of unexpected kindness and the enduring spirit of connection. The galactic narrative around humanity began to shift. They were no longer just the strange, resilient species from a volatile homeworld. They were the ones who could talk to monsters, the ones who offered food instead of fear, and the ones who reminded a jaded galaxy that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in weapons or technology, but in a simple, heartfelt question: have you eaten today? The galaxy, it turned out, still had much to learn about the most unpredictable species of all.